Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Mad Meta Magic, where we are going to play Azorius turns with a few minor refinements, I think. So, refinement number one, I swapped up the mana base a little bit. I dropped the manland, and I added the 4th Mystic Sanctuary and the 3rd Hallowed Fountain. I really want to max out on Mystic Sanctuary, because if the mana base can support it, if these don't come in tapped too often, it's the effect I wanted the most of. Every single time we played Mystic Sanctuary, with the exception of when our opener had 3, like, the card was insane. So I absolutely want the 4th one. If the mana base can sustain it, we'll see. Which unfortunately means we have to max out against islands, so we're even weaker to boil than we were. However, in the side, I have dropped a few of the spells that I didn't ever see myself legitimately casting, like Celestial Purge, and I added a Force of Negation. Actually, I think that's all I did to the side. And then I was thinking about trying to fit in a slightly different warp, or maybe a 3rd exhaustion, but I actually think the deck is probably fine with just those tweaks. So with that, we are going to take this into a Modern League, and we're going to try it out. Alright, round 1. Also, you guys got to let me know what you think about 2 videos whenever I release a Tron video. Be interested to know. Alright, we won the die roll. We would love to play first. If this had one more land, I would say yes, but we can't play it like that. So 1 land Serum Vision should be enough to get to 2 land, especially with 24 land in the deck. We would be putting back Temporal Mastery and shuffling, so we might be able to draw a Temporal Mastery. To help get us back on track. I like having 2 Howling Mines and a Teferi. It's just the 1 land that's risky, but I don't know that I want to go to 5. Especially against... Maybe I should go to 5 against an unknown opponent. Oh, so this video is going up Wednesday. If you are going to watch my stream later tonight, it might be a little later than 6 p.m. My puppy Porter is going to have to go to the vet. He needs to be re-upped on his vaccination, and today was the only day that I could get him in to do that. So if it's a little late tonight, I apologize. Opponent kept the game, started the game with 7. Since we're on the play and we have a Serum Visions, I think I'm going to start like this. I am going to fetch and shock. Unfortunately, we are going to need to guarantee that we can get white and blue mana. Land. Oh, perfect. Force of Negation would not be a bad draw, but the problem is, if we don't play Prairie Stream next turn, we won't have a 3rd untapped land, because we didn't start with a basic. If we started with a basic island here, and we had drawn the basic plains, Prairie Stream would come in untapped because we'd have 2 basics. But the odds of that particular setup of lands is pretty low. We only run 2 Prairie Stream, and it's just to help with the pain off of the mana base. Because this deck has problems with early aggression, so it has problems with its life total. But that's what Timely Reinforcements is in the side for. Oh no. Yep, okay. So playing Howling Mines in this matchup is what we would call a little less than ideal. But we'll play a Prairie Stream tapped, and as long as our opponent doesn't Desperate Ritual into a Blood Moon, we should be fine. We do have to be very careful, because our opponent does have the capability to cast a ridiculous amount of damage basically every single turn. Hopefully our opponent doesn't play more than 1 threat. The best line would be for them to just Lava Spike twice, because with their threat not having haste, Teferi Bounce is actually a little bit reasonable, and it would mean that in order for them to kill it, they have to play a haste creature that can attack it, or they have to cast a burn spell on their turn, which is going to use up their mana and stem their aggression against our life total for a turn. So Teferi is it's like a half-turn tempo advantage, so it's like a half-turn time warp kind of a deal. But that's only if our opponent does not play another threat. If our opponent plays another threat, Teferi can just, tuck his head between his knees and kiss his ass goodbye. Also, channel news this morning, we passed 230 subscribers in what I would describe as an alarming period of time. Thank you all so much, everybody who's subscribed. I greatly appreciate that. Alright. Well, we're still going to unsummon the Soul Scar Mage because we need to draw, and this doesn't have haste, so it doesn't immediately fly back in and do some damage. Although, unsummoning Sprite Dragon is a little bit tempting because they have to tap more mana to do that. Mystic Sanctuary is going to come in tapped because we do not have 3 islands yet. Unfortunately, we drew the only straight plains in our deck. And the only other non-island land that we run, I think, is a Singleton Mikokoro. Yeah, I think we have to play a Dictate on 4. So play Teferi. Either card we unsummon... You know what, I'm actually going to unsummon the 2-drop, and my reasoning behind this is this gets permanent 1/1 counters when you cast non-creature spells, and it costs more, which means my opponent is doing less with their turn next turn. Alright, we unsummon, we get another Teferi, so basically, at worst, we just repeat this turn, effectively, which, it's not terrible, unless my opponent plays a land and like a Swift Spear. Oh, well. Alright, opponent Lava Darts to kill Teferi, and they're going to get in for 4. Okay, we go to 11. Well, we can Teferi and unsummon Soul Scar Mage this turn. Cryptic Command is not bad. Alright, well, unfortunately we have to play Mystic Sanctuary tapped. We can either play Teferi and unsummon, and then our opponent will ping Teferi and hit us for 4 again. If we play Dictate, though, we can start comboing off if we hit a land, an untapped land. Which, I think at this point all lands come in untapped because I dropped the Colonnade. So we're going to flash Dictate at our opponent's end step, and I really don't think they play counter spells in the main deck. Okay. Swift Spear number 3, or 2. These are effectively the same card after the first turn. Opponent attacks for 3. I get a Lava Dart. So, slight miscalculation. That Lava Dart is actually lethal. I kept expecting for them to replay the Sprite Dragon and not have lethal. So, alright, well that's a little unfortunate. We kind of kept a bad hand, and we were on our way to victory, but we needed, like, let's see. Next turn, we would have comboed off. Yeah, next turn we would have beat them. Okay. So, versus my opponent's deck. I want Timelies for sure. Force of Negation is still, like, kind of good. I'm going to drop Giga Draws for Timely Reinforcements, which I know kind of sucks because we're upping our 3-drop slot, which is pretty horrible. We're going to cut Jace, because Jace dies immediately to a bolt unless we have Teferi. And I'm going to cut a Teferi, and I think I'm going to bring in probably my 2 paths, or a path and a verdict. Let's try that. Let's go up to 2 paths and a verdict. So the cool thing about Mystic Sanctuary chaining is if we're not chaining a Time Warp, we can chain Timely Reinforcements. This hand is probably keepable because of Force, and that's about it. Force, Serum Visions, and a land. We don't have to shock, but if we don't, I'm worried about our ability to get white mana. Alright, we're doing it. Hollowed Fountain, let's go. Serum Visions, land. Mystic Sanctuary is technically a land. Unfortunately, both of these gotta go to the bottom, because we need another land and bad. At this point, I think I'm going to have to pitch Time Warp to Force of Negation, and I will do that next turn if my opponent casts Manamorphose so that they can't cast Stormwing Entity. Okay. Opponent gets in for 1. Reasonable. We untap. We draw Serum Visions, so play Serum Visions. We draw Serum Visions. Path to the bottom, Timely to the bottom, oh no. Play Mystic Sanctuary, pass the turn. So, in favor of drawing lands, we've had to just move almost our entire sideboard to the bottom of our deck, which is not a good place you want to be. Which is not a good place and not a place you want to be. I shouldn't portmanteau sayings like that together. Alright. Opponent shocks a Steam Vents and gets in for 1. Okay. They're going to Wild Slash, Prowess. Okay. We take 2. And our opponent passes. We untap. You know what? At this point, it's a redraw, so I am going to miracle this. This gives us one more shot at a land. Unfortunately, we don't. If we had a land that we could cast the Serum Visions, it would be so good. But we had no way to take advantage of that extra turn. So, play me Kokoro. Serum Visions. We could Exhaustion here, but I don't think it's good. Teferi and Dictate. Teferi is a lot more fragile. Dictate is part of what we need to combo. So put Dictate on top. Pass the turn, and we're probably going to path their creature and force something. Unfortunately, Prairie Stream enters tapped. I might have needed to trim a Prairie Stream or a Hollowed Fountain for another island, and I really hope that's not the case. Okay, opponent plays an Arid Mesa, cracks Arid Mesa, gets a Mountain, Manamorphose. Okay, if I force this, I have to get rid of Exhaustion, or Verdict, actually. Verdict we're not casting for a while, so I'm actually going to get rid of Verdict. It is our only board wipe, but I think single target removal ought to be enough. Opponent has Spell Pierce. This means we can't path this turn, and we won't be able to path next turn. We're only taking 3... Okay, we'll pay for it. Okay, we take 3, go to 9. Untap, we draw Dictate, play Prairie Stream, pass the turn. So the plan is to hold up Path to Exile unless my opponent has lethal and we need Path in order to interact. We can get around another Spell Pierce if we have to cast Path. But we are going to try and flash Dictate at my opponent's end step. If they crack Fiery Islet, that's good because then they don't have as much mana this turn. So opponent is spending their turn to cast a Blood Moon. I don't like this, but we need to draw basic islands. I also didn't know Blitz ran Blood Moon, though I should know that because I was doing research for No Sideboard Red, the video that went up yesterday. Opponent did take themselves off of blue mana as well. Okay, we need to top deck a basic island. Oh, wow. It's like island or lose. Okay, island. Exhaust our opponent. Now we need to draw another basic island, which we have a reasonable number of them in the deck. It's something like 7 or 8, so... Problem is my opponent is drawing additional cards, and they have free spells. So they get in for 1. Flooded Strand is not a basic, and neither is Mystic Sanctuary. Yeah, I think that means we die. We've given our opponent 3 extra draws, basically. Or 2 extra draws. And they have 2 threats. Literally 1 spell will kill us. Because most of their spells do 3 damage. So when it goes to combat, attacks for 2. We go to 4. Oh, we're not dead? Oh man, okay. Well, we still have the out of drawing a basic island. There it is. Holy crap, we're not dead. Well, we're at 4 life, not 3. We need to be at 3 life for us to be dead to bolt. Alright, Temporal Mastery. Unless my opponent is slow rolling 2 bolts to get around Force of Negation. Which is technically possible. We're going to have trouble taking advantage of actually casting these Time Warps. Okay, Howling Mine is a good start. Temporal Mastery, or not Temporal Mastery, Time Warp. We will play Flooded Strand just to have an extra mana next turn. But short of drawing a 3rd island and a Cryptic, we can't, like, deal with this Blood Moon. Yeah, we can't cast anything in our hand now. And our opponent is drawing 2 extra cards. I guess, theoretically, if they're holding 7 lands, we're not dead. They played a land. Yeah, that kills us. Alright. Okay, well... new mana base is a little rough around the edges. Definitely a little softer to Blood Moon for sure. So, I'll see you guys in round 2. Alright, round 2, here we go. Would love to play first. This is doable. I'll keep. We're going to start Hollowed Fountain tapped. Play a Hollowed Fountain tapped, pass the turn. Opponent plays Colonnade. So we're probably against Control. Giga Draw should help a lot, but it's no longer the Control Slayer it used to be, simply because Force of Negation exists. When you're casting gigantic non-creature spells on your turn, Force of Negation is pretty horrible. We do have Teferis in our deck, though. And we are drawing extra cards. Okay, there's a Dictate. So we'll play an island, pass the turn. Okay, opponent casts an Opt. And they play a Field of Ruin. Flash Dictate at their end step. You really should not cast spells against a control opponent who has 8 cards in hand. But apparently my opponent does not have counter spells they want to waste on that. Alright, we're going to Serum Visions. Okay, we drew Time Warp. Mystic Sanctuary to the bottom. Island to the bottom. We are going to play Polluted Delta. And we are going to fetch a regular island. I guess we can get a Prairie Stream, actually. If my opponent activates Field, we have to get an island. Okay. They're not activating Field, they're casting Opt. But my plan is to Giga Draws my opponent on their upkeep. Opponent has cast a lot of cantrips. This doesn't really solve our opponent having Force of Negation problem, though. But we don't have any spells we can really bait with. We just have to, like, try and make sure our opponent doesn't have a force. So opponent is going to activate Field. We really only need 1 white mana, so getting an island is fine. Oh shoot, I should not be F6'd. I'm holding a Force of Negation. Okay, my opponent has 10 cards in hand. Alright, a second Force of Negation. Okay, so I fully expect this Time Warp to be countered. If it's not, my opponent's probably just gonna die. Okay, there's Force. Unfortunately, Force exiles. I was expecting a mana leak, but it's not what we got. It sucks because we're holding a Mystic Sanctuary, but we have Force of Negations for anything our opponent might try this turn. Like if they tap out for Jace or a Teferi. Mystic Sanctuary. They're going to put Force of Negation on top of their deck. Okay. So my opponent is drawing Force next turn. Alright. Time Warp was the perfect draw. Okay. And considering my opponent does not have another Force of Negation in their hand currently, I think they're screwed. Yep. And opponent knows it too. Cool, so versus control. Versus control, I kind of like silence. I'll cut path. I'm going to cut Jace. I think Jace is too expensive to be casting against an opponent like this. And I'm going to bring in the 4th Force, go down a Serum Visions, and I think a Cryptic. Cryptic is nice, but it's too expensive. It's really expensive versus a control matchup. It's good because it's an instant that we can cast on our opponent's turn that can't necessarily be forced, because force only works on your opponent's turn. Okay, yeah, I can work with this. 3 islands is a pretty good start. At least my opponent's not playing Boil. Okay, opponent starts. Hollow Fountain tapped. We draw another Teferi. Well, Serum Visions. Prairie Stream. Prairie Stream is actually quite excellent. Serum Visions to the bottom, Force of Negation to the top. Pass the turn. Opponent plays an island. We draw Force. We play an island. You know, I wonder if this deck could benefit from Leyline of Anticipation. That would be hilarious, I think. It's like being able to, like, flash Teferi in on your opponent's end step, and it's just like, good luck. I don't think we could play with the card disadvantage, though, which is what sucks. Okay, we're gonna try this. We're going to force our opponent to have Force. I guess they could also have Mystical Dispute. Opponent flashes another Omen of the Sea. Giga Draws is not as good when your opponent goes first, because they will outpace the number of permanents that you can tap. Prairie Stream, showing its best job as a Tundra. Late Fairy. This should draw Force of Negation, yep. Okay. Then they opt. Okay, they should tap out here for a Jace or their own Teferi, which we will have a Force of Negation to deal with. And then we should get down our Teferi. Okay. But they don't. And that's a lot of open mana. Okay. Play an island. Pass the turn. We're just going to flash dictate at our opponent's end step. Okay. Opponent Mystic Sanctuary. They're putting Force of Negation on top. I can't remember if I brought in Silence or not. I think I should have. Play Flooded Strand, actually. Play Teferi. Opponent has a mana leak. Alright. Okay, we can't pay for mana leak. Pass the turn. So our opponent will draw a Force of Negation and one unknown. Yeah, I can't allow that. An opponent realizes that if they try and counter... Actually, I think they're pump faking. I don't think they have a 2-mana counter spell. We do not want to Mystic Sanctuary anything in our grave back on top of our deck right now. So untap, we draw Silence, and another Force. Okay? Play Mikokoro, pass the turn. Silence is hilariously good in control matchups like these. Because you can use it to force a counterspell out of your opponent, because they don't know what you're going to cast. Alright, we'll just cast Force. Do we want to be holding Force of Negation? We're going to fetch here. We can just get a Prairie Stream, actually. I want to have another white mana. Activate Mikokoro. Draw Dictate. Untap. We will Miracle a Temporal Mastery, because holy crap. And I'm going to cast Silence. So this is going to resolve. Unfortunately, though, this means my opponent will have Force of Negation next turn, so that may have been a waste. I just really, really wanted that to resolve. Okay. Mystic Sanctuary. We will put Silence on top of our deck. This was my plan all along, I swear. Untap. Draw 3 cards. Mystic Sanctuary, part the Water Veil. We are 1 mana off of Awakening, part the Water Veil. However, we know our opponent's holding Force. I think we have to Silence and then part. So cast with no Awaken. Mystic Sanctuary. Put Silence on top of our deck. So draw Silence, draw Mystic Sanctuary, and draw Time Warp. If anything, this is giving us a lot of mana. We're looking for, like, Teferi, though. So Silence, Mystic Sanctuary, put Silence on top. Time Warp. Draw a card. Okay. Untap. We draw Flooded Strand, Exhaustion, Polluted Delta. Okay. Exhaust our opponent. This is our Force bait. Oh, they didn't take it. So, play Flooded Strand, and it's time to see that 4th Mystic Sanctuary pay off. Pass the turn. Okay. Opponent untaps, draws 2 extra cards. They play a Flooded Strand, and then they pass. So we fetch with Flooded Strand, get Mystic Sanctuary. Mystic Sanctuary, put Time Warp on top of our deck. Draw a card with Mikokoro. Untap. Opponent has to discard. They have to discard 3 cards. We're trying to draw Teferi. Silence into Teferi, I think, would win. Okay. So, cast Serum Visions. Exhaustion, Temporal Mastery. We're going to go top, top, Silence, Time Warp, Howling Mine, Hallowed Fountain, tapped. But we're out of Mystic Sanctuary buybacks. So we're hoping that 2 Time Warps this turn for cheap will draw the counterspell. We will reveal Temporal Mastery. Oops, doing this in the wrong order, but okay, we draw Exhaust, draw Time Warp. We'll cast Temporal Mastery. Okay, opponent doesn't seem to care. Another Silence. Okay, so I'm gonna queue up 2 turns, and we're gonna exhaust our opponent. They're gonna queue up basically 3 turns. Untap. first extra turn. Draw 4 cards. Okay, we get a Snapcaster. So, flash in Snapcaster. Time Warp. Time Warp, target ourselves. We might actually run out of cards in our deck. We have to be careful. We're looking for a Teferi so that we can end this game. Also part the Water Veil. So many extra turns. So play an island. Cast a Giga Drowse. No replicate. I just realized we need to play around Path to Exile. Okay. Opponent cracks Flooded Strand. Gets a regular island. Okay. That's actually less concerning. No more path we have to worry about. So we silence. Awaken the island. Go to combat. Attack for 8. Okay. Untap. We draw Teferi. Okay, opponent concedes. At this point, we still have like 2 extra turns in queue, and their Force of Negation doesn't save them. So, we win. I'll see you guys in round 3. Alright. Round 3, here we go. There's no Howling Mine effects in this hand, and Force of Negation, while it's a decent way to take advantage of Temporal Mastery here, if there's a single Howling Mine, I would keep this. Really call on my bluff, huh? Alright. Well, I think it's important enough that I'm going to do this. Half the time, all we need to do is draw cards and play land. Okay? Teferi is an excellent top deck. Zagoth Triome. Interesting. So we're playing against Sultai. And that means they're going to be Uropile or Reclamation Nexus, I guess. I'm not too familiar with Sultai decks. They're in the 1-in-1 bracket as well. So I'm not saying their deck is bad, but it's less likely to be meta. Actually, let me check before I make a complete idiot of myself on stream or on record here. Let's see, Modern. Uro's usually Bant. It could be Niv to Light. And there's basically blue-black control with green splashed for Uro, Ice Fang, and Assassin's Trophy. Which I imagine is what this must be. Okay, we are going to fetch basics. Because if we play a couple of basics here, we can get our prairie streams. We no longer have untapped lands, is what I'm getting at. Or we no longer have tapped lands, excuse me. Okay, Field of the Dead. So this could be like 5-color Scape Shift. Okay, opponent shocks Breeding Pool. Probably Uro. Ah, Wilderness Reclamation. That is a problem. Okay. If we can get down to Fairy, this is not a problem. But our opponent will have Remand / Negate / Mana Leak mana. So Flooded Strand, we'll get Prairie Stream. Play Teferi. Unsummon the enchantment. Every time my opponent has to recast a spell like that, it's good for us. Okay. Opponent main phases a Growth Spiral, because they can only main phase spells at the moment. They could have Assassin's Trophy. They could also just have the lands to cast Nexus again. But if they do that, they can't play any spells on their end step. They don't have Cryptic mana. They main phase Fact or Fiction. Okay. You can have lands or spells. They take spells. We draw Time Warp. Tick up to Fairy. Play an island. And I guess we go double Howling Mine here. My opponent actually could be running Maelstrom Pulse, which would suck. But we would have much bigger problems if they had Maelstrom Pulse, because they wouldn't hit Howling Mine, they'd hit Teferi. If we untap with our entire position intact, our opponent loses. Okay. They play a land, they Growth Spiral. They play another land, they get 2 zombies. And they play Wilderness Reclamation. But that only helps them at their end step, and currently they cannot cast spells. So we draw 2 cards. Force of Negation might be useful at some point. Play a Flooded Strand, fetch Prairie Stream. Time Warp ourselves. Okay. We need to draw a Time Warp or a Serum Visions so that we can Mystic Sanctuary and draw a Time Warp. Okay, there's Serum Visions. Part the Water Veil, Mystic Sanctuary. Okay. Play Mystic Sanctuary. Put Time Warp on top. Plus Teferi. And the dangerous part is over. Because we're going to cast the same Time Warp about 5 times. So that was 1. This will be 2. Serum Visions. Actually, I want another Serum Visions. Time Warp. Untap. Man, putting the card on top of your deck is, like, all disadvantages of that are completely negated when you draw, like, 4 cards a turn. It's pretty sweet, actually. So fetch, get a Mystic Sanctuary. Time Warp to the top. I'm really glad in matchups like this that we have maxed out on Mystic Sanctuary, because holy crap is that powerful. Alright, so we Time Warp. Untap. We draw another Force, another Mystic Sanctuary, and a Temporal Mastery. Take up Teferi. Play Mystic Sanctuary. Put Time Warp on top. Cast a Temporal Mastery. Untap. Okay. Draw a whole bunch of cards. Play a regular island. Unsummon a zombie. Awaken an island. So my opponent can fetch and make 2 more zombies. So we can't actually attack next turn, but we need this creature ready to go, basically. Discard Hallowed Fountain. Discard Dictate. Untap. Like, we have all the time in the world, literally, to figure out a way around this Misty Rainforest. Okay, we draw Exhaustion. And another Teferi. So, take up this Teferi. Temporal Mastery. Play Misty. Serum Visions. Draw an island, Time Warp on top. I'm actually going to put that Time Warp to the bottom. Okay, no attacks. Discarding Exhaustion. Untap. We draw Giga Drowse, and another Part the Water Veil. Giga Drowse actually does it, and I suppose I could have gotten that sooner with Misty getting our last Mystic Sanctuary, but... Unsummon the zombie. Force them to tap Misty Rainforest. Okay. They crack it. So we're going to play Teferi, unsummon a zombie. Go to combat. Attack for 6. Opponent does not block. So we... Time Warp. Fetch Mystic Sanctuary. Putting Time Warp on top. Discard Flooded Strand. Untap. Draw a whole bunch of stuff. Uptick Teferi. And this time, you know what, we'll awaken the plains. Attack our opponent for 12, they have to block. And we get an extra turn. So, looks like we get game 1. After so many minutes. Okay, so versus our opponent's deck, we're maximizing on Force. I kind of want to maximize on Aether Gust as well. Silence is probably good. Giga Drowse really loses a lot of its power when your opponent untaps all their lands at their end step, but it might actually still be good. We're going to go down Jace for the last Force. And I think I'm going to go down Path and 1 Serum Visions for a couple of Aether Gusts. Could you imagine if Silence said, until your opponent's next turn, they can't cast spells? Oh, man. How dirty that would be with Time Warps. But it does not, unfortunately for us, and fortunately for every other human being that plays Magic. This is really close. I think being on the draw, we can keep this. The only way this hand would get better is if we had a force. Yeah. It's got everything we want in a hand, so... Except force, I guess, but... Opponent starts Misty. Giga Drow's not bad either. We're going to fetch a Hallowed Fountain and cast Serum Visions. Draw to Fairy. Temporal Mastery on top, Island on top of Temporal Mastery. Okay. Opponent fetches. They get their Triome. Okay, we untap. We draw a Snow-Covered Island. We'll play the Snow-Covered Island. Pass the turn. I want to be able to Giga Drowse so that we can Temporal Mastery uncontested, or almost uncontested. Okay, opponent Growth Spirals. Never mind, that was a pipe dream. Should have played the Mystic Sanctuary. If my opponent runs out of Wilderness Reclamation here, it will go uncontested, but also that's incredibly ballsy. If I had a Mana Leak, you'd be done. I mean, they probably have a Force of Negation, right? But, like, at the same time, opponent is sitting on some adamantine balls, let me tell you. He's not scared of anything. He conquers wilderness and doesn't afraid of anything. Alright, untap. Miracle Temporal. This is probably a thing you counter. No? Alright. I guess Teferi might be the only thing they're scared of. Since we have two, we are going to test the water here before my opponent can use their massive mana advantage to draw a bunch of cards. Okay. Sweet. Okay, opponent has to spend their turn Abrupt Decaying and playing a field. We untap. We draw a Time Warp. So we really need to draw land here. If my opponent has another, I guess another like Abrupt Decay effect, we might be very sad. Get a basic island. We're going to Serum Visions. We draw Prairie Stream. We want these lands. I want I want at least one of these lands on top of my deck. So we don't need double white. Hallowed Fountain to the bottom, Mikokoro to the top. Or we don't need triple white, excuse me. I'm holding double white. The problem is right now we don't have a way to draw additional cards every turn. Teferi is 1/4 of a Howling Mine, because he can draw you a card every 4 turns. Okay, opponent plays Wilderness Reclamation. I want to make sure that resolves first. They Assassin's Trophy us, so we shuffle. We get an island. Our opponent untaps all their lands. Oh my god, yes. Cast Temporal. Opponent has to have a counterspell right now. Otherwise, we just start going off. We may have gotten them just by virtue of the fact they're not holding a force. We're not stopping them from interacting on our turn, but like... I mean, even if they've got an Assassin's Trophy, like... Ooh, they can counterpart the Water Veil if they can Assassin's Trophy our land. So we need to be aware of that and play supremely cautiously. 1 mana off of playing another Dictate. Okay. I probably should have taken out Exhaustion considering the amount of land untapping my opponent does. Okay, we get an Aether Gust, a Time Warp, and a Teferi. So, play Teferi. I'm going to make you replay that Nexus again, opponent. Ooh, and we have a Aether Gust for it as well. That's nice. Aether Gust does counter Abrupt Decay, quote-unquote counter. And Exhaustion gets pitched to Force of Negation, which is excellent. I think we actually navigated our way into a situation where we're going to win, simply because our opponent ran out of interaction. So as long as I don't actively punt this game away, which is possible, we should win. Opponent gets to draw 2 additional cards. So if my opponent casts Nexus, or Reclamation, I keep calling it Reclamation Nexus, but that's the deck. And that's not even probably what my opponent is doing, they're probably just Uro Nexus. Or Uro Reclamation. Let me gather my thoughts for a second. If my opponent casts Reclamation, I will Force of Negation Reclamation. Because, at that point, the only spells they could cast we could care about are at least partially green, and Aether Gust can handle them. Then my opponent will be tapped out. Then the other exhaustion we have is effectively an actual Time Warp. The only thing we have to worry... I was going to say, the only thing we have to worry about is Force of Negation, but we still have a Teferi on board, so we actually don't. The opponent is putting Abrupt Decay on top of their deck. They're casting Uro to draw a card? Sure. So they draw Abrupt Decay and sack Uro. They get a zombie. Okay. Can't be countered, but it can be gusted. They also Abrupt Decay Dictate and not Teferi. Okay, and that's all our opponent's got. We draw land, part, Mystic Sanctuary. So untap, or uptick, I mean. Time Warp ourselves, play Mystic Sanctuary, put Time Warp on top, exhaust our opponent, pass to our next turn. Okay. Up to Fairy. Awaken the Plains. So my opponent can make one additional blocker, which is not enough to block down the Plains, and our opponent concedes. Alright. We did it! I will see you guys in round 4. Alrighty, round 4. I've had time to eat my breakfast, drink more coffee, walk the dog, and most importantly, Zendikar Rising spoilers have happened since I've been able to record. Okay, if we draw another island, this is actually really good, and if we don't, it's not so great. But we're going to keep. I might actually start with a Mystic Sanctuary against a Giver of Runes deck. I think that's correct. We're not going to Miracle Temporal Mastery. We'll start Hollowed Fountain and see what happens. That's our only Pain land, and I suspect we're going to draw another island soon. Oh, shoot. Turn off auto yields. We might be forcing something. You never know. Okay, opponent doesn't do anything. We draw Serum Visions. We'll cast Serum Visions. We draw Cryptic, dictate Hollowed Fountain on top, dictate to the bottom, Hollowed Fountain to the top, and play a regular island. This does mean we have to shock, but then it allows us full use of our Mystic Sanctuaries, and that's one of the major testing points with this league that I'm trying to find out, is whether or not having all 4 in the deck is too many, or not. Okay, opponent does not attack. They want to keep back their Giver of Runes. Sure. We untap. We will shock Hollowed Fountain. Opponent probably thinks we're, what's it called? Blue-white control. Okay, opponent plays a Tectonic Edge. That's actually really annoying. They attack for 4. Sure, no blocks. We will need to get to 5 mana. So miracling a Temporal Mastery here would be absolutely absurd. Exhaustion would be very good. Oh, so close. We'll play Flooded Strand, and we're going to pass. Opponent's probably going to Tech Edge at our end step. No, they are going to flash in a Restoration Angel. We could counter this and bounce the token, and then our opponent has absolutely no aggression for a very long time. We have to fetch to do that, but like that's not bad. Let's see, counter target spell. Oh no, actually, hang on. Big brain here. If we do that, our opponent can give hexproof, or not hexproof, but protection. That's a problem. We're just going to counter draw. Actually, are we? Is just tapping our opponent's creatures next turn better? I think it is. We could counter and bounce Tech Edge, but then we know. Then our opponent would know we don't want them to Tech Edge, and they would immediately Tech Edge us. We could counter and bounce the Giver. That would make our opponent do something. I think we just counter draw. We have Force if our opponent has like a crazy non-creature spell. This still makes us look like what's it called? Blue-white control to be making this play. Okay, so when it goes to combat, attacks for 4. Okay, no blocks. Take 4, go to 8. So Force of Negation here would be very bad. Or not Force of Negation, Tech Edge would be very bad here. Opponent Tech Edges us, plays a Sunbaked Canyon, and an Eldrazi Displacer. This almost looks like mono-white combo. We untap, draw an Island and Giga Drowse. Well, we can use Giga Drowse to stem like all aggression from our opponent. So I'm actually going to pass, and I'm going to discard a Temporal Mastery. But we have 2 Mystic Sanctuaries, and my opponent might have to crack Scavenger Grounds by us playing the first Mystic Sanctuary. I'm going to use Giga Drowse to basically tap down their board. All sack lands, huh? Must be a deck that normally struggles with card advantage. Okay. So, Giga Drowse. Replicated 3 times. Tap there, tap there, tap there, and tap Scavenger Grounds. Our opponent's played a land. We don't care about getting hit by a 1-1, and we're probably taking 4 damage this turn anyway. But unless they have some kind of extra protection spell, like an Apostle's Blessing or something like this, this is an extremely advantageous line. We can play Mystic Sanctuary, put Temporal Mastery on top, which is absurd, because we guarantee a Time Walk if we do that. Then we can just Time Warp, Temporal Mastery, land to Fairy, bounce something, play Mystic Sanctuary again, draw Time Warp, and like just go off. It would be absurd. If our opponent cracks Scavenger Grounds here, that's bad, but it's not the end of the game, because we will at the very least Time Warp and loop it 1 time. Okay, so they protect the Golem. They don't crack Scavenger Grounds. They go to combat. We could get Boros Charmed here, I guess, but it looks like they're mono-white. And we have Force. We could pitch a Temporal Mastery to that. Okay. Opponent untap. Or opponent lets us untap. We draw Howling Mine and Polluted Delta. We'll play Mystic Sanctuary. Put Temporal Mastery on top. Oh, man. Time Warp. No Mana Tithe, please. Whew, no Mana Tithe. Man, we would have gotten absolutely destroyed by that. Untap. Miracle Temporal Mastery. See what our other card we draw is as well. Okay. So, cast Temporal Mastery. Go to main phase. Play Mystic Sanctuary. Put Time Warp on top. Play Time Raveler. Okay, opponent can no longer interact on our turn. Unsummon. Our opponent can flicker one thing once. So, unsummon the token. If they flicker the token, I'm pretty sure we don't get to draw. But they have to pay 2 life and use all their mana to do that. We don't need the draw to win. Alright, opponent lets it resolve. So we go to next turn. Untap. We draw Exhaustion and a Flooded Strand. So, Time Warp ourselves. Plus Teferi. Play Polluted Delta. Crack Polluted Delta. Get Mystic Sanctuary. Put Time Warp on top. We do need a way to deal with this Eldrazi Displacer, because they can flicker the land that we animate with Part the Water Veil, and turn it back into just a land. Okay, untap. We draw Time Warp. Draw Exhaustion and another Force. Play Flooded Strand. Uptick to Fairy. I think we can just get there by upticking to Fairy and then unsummoning it. And maybe I should have started with that unsummon first, but... Cast Temporal Mastery. Pass the turn. We're not cracking the Flooded Strand. Untap. We draw another Teferi. Okay. Play an island. Uptick to Fairy. Time Warp ourselves. Exhaust our opponent. Fetch our last Mystic Sanctuary. Put Time Warp on top. Okay. Pass the next turn. Untap. Draw Time Warp and 2 more cards. Another Time Warp. Play Prairie Stream. Unsummon Displacer. Okay. We will awaken, I guess, this island. Go to combat. They know we're holding a Time Warp, and we've definitely won. So, alright. Game 2. So our opponent's deck is just dudes, as far as I can tell. They might have like Path and stuff like that, but I've got a feeling they're going to play mostly at sorcery speed, with the exception of maybe Restoration Angel. So I'm going to bring in Silence and Path. Because they're mono-white, Aether Gust does nothing. Verdict is actually pretty tempting as well. Giga Drowse is not great. Teferi is not as good, and neither is Force of Negation. So we can trim down to 3 Teferi. We're keeping Exhaustion, even without Giga Drowse. Mind Sculptor is fine. Okay. And I think this is how we should be set up to play this deck. I think having an instant speed Supreme Verdict off of Teferi versus this deck will be crazy bonkers. Alright, this looks like a good hand. I will keep. We're going to start Island and not Misty Rainforest in case we need to get Mystic Sanctuary later, and we draw lands. Okay, opponent starts Aether Vial. We took out our Force, which is the only way we would actually reasonably be able to answer that spell. We draw another Teferi, Snapcaster to the bottom, Exhaustion to the top. Pass the turn. I still like the Singleton Snapcaster, but with Mystic Sanctuary, you don't want to be exiling spells out of your grave that often. It's good in, like, a pinch to get some beats in, but... Opponent currently on the mono colorless lands plan. Serum Visions again. Okay, Howling Mine, Dictate to the bottom, Path to the top, Hallowed Fountain tapped, pass the turn. Next turn, if my opponent keeps playing colorless lands and has nothing to play off of them, we can resolve a Teferi, which will be sweet, because then we can bounce Aether Vial. Alright, opponent does have Thalia. Not actually that big of a deal right now, because we just drew Path. Exhaustion, worth noting that it does nothing against Aether Vial, so we could fetch and play Howling Mine, but I don't want to give my opponent extra draws yet. We're just going to hold up Path, in case my opponent plays like Eldrazi Temple, Thought Not Seer, or something like that. Okay, they play Plains. They go to combat. Attack for 2. We'll take the 2. Okay, they're going to play a Blade Splicer. I've got the feeling they have a Flicker Wisp, but we're going to have to do this anyway. Okay, we do Path Thalia. Opponent gets a Plains. The only other basic they presumably run is Wastes, and they don't need colorless mana right now. Okay. So on our opponent's end step, we'll fetch. Even Mind Sensor. Top 4 lands, let's do it. Island, perfect. Gotcha, Mind Sensor. Another Island. It's actually quite good. So we can play Teferi, bounce the Golem, stop a lot of aggression, and force our opponent to basically Tech Edge. We could also exhaust them and not let them have mana, but they're going to have an active Aether Vial and we're taking a lot of damage. If we exhaust them, though, they won't be able to Tech Edge us. We do need to draw more lands, though. And Teferi is like the only spell we have right now that's white, so I'm going to just unsummon the Golem. Okay, we drew a Dictate. They will be able to kill Teferi, but I think that's fine. The Tech Edge is the biggest problem. Thankfully, we've not seen a Leon and Arbiter out of our opponent, because that would be a huge, huge issue. We would basically have to max out on creature removal. Even Mind Sensor is bad, but it's not unbeatable. Another Tech Edge, oh god. Okay, well, and they kill Teferi, they get in, deal 2 to us. We untap, we draw Hallowed Fountain. So, play Hallowed Fountain untapped. Play Teferi. Unsummon Aether Vial, tell them they have to play fair. Opponent Vials in, just Splacer, okay? We get a Serum Visions. We draw Prairie Stream, which is good. Snapcaster to the bottom, Exhaustion to the top. So my opponent's going to have to Tech Edge, I think, but they're going to Flicker now so that they can get a little more value. I think their plan is to replay Vial and then Tech Edge, and kill Teferi, of course. If they don't Tech Edge us, we can land Howling Mind and Exhaustion, and we're fine. Even if they do Tech Edge us, we can still play Exhaustion and have multiple Exhaustions. Okay? Opponent did not Tech Edge us, so I think they lose. They can Flicker once and get a token here. Oh shoot. Oh, we're dead. I was gonna say, if they've got Resto, we die. If they were just flickering with Eldrazi Displacer like I thought they were gonna do, we would have been fine. So in reality, we needed to cast a Time Warp there and draw something else, but that didn't happen. Okay. Well, we'll be on the play for Game 3, so our matchup should be significantly better. Yeah, I don't think we run Force of Negation. I don't think we run Brazen Borrower. Giga Drow's still not really what we want to be doing. Like, we could play Timely, but I think we're set up as good as we can be set up right now. I just like the lines we have currently better. Alright, we'll play first. Yeah, I think this is fine. We'll keep. We can stick mostly to basics. which will be good. Opponent mulligans to 6. Play Serum Visions. We get a Mikokoro. Prairie Stream to the bottom, Path to the top. Got a feeling we're going to need Path. Okay, opponent starts Plains Giver. We'll play Flooded Strand, pass the turn. Problem is we might have to Path Giver. Sheffet Dunes. Okay, opponent gets in for 1. I'm going to fetch up a basic island here. Okay. Play Mikokoro. I'm going to take myself off of Path this turn, because I really want to draw an additional card. My opponent is playing a very slow game. Okay. They get in for 1. We go to 17. Okay, if they're just going to hold up Tech Edge as their best play, I don't think it's very good. So we untap, we draw Howling Mine, play Hallowed Fountain, play Teferi, even Mind Sensor. Okay. So they were waiting to see if we had a fetch land. So we bounce Giver. Okay, we draw Mystic Sanctuary. It's cheaper for our opponent to replay, but it doesn't let them hold up mana. I guess Teferi makes them play at sorcery speed anyway. Maybe I should have hit Aven Mind Sensor, but... Well, no, because it would have died to the Giver attacking. Opponent could play Giver and then just Tech Edge. Yeah. So they play Tech Edge, they have Ghost Quarter. They Ghost Quarter an island like a jerk. No basic lands. And they play Giver. We untap. We draw Cryptic Command, and we've kind of screwed ourselves into not getting white mana here. So we're going to play Mystic Sanctuary tapped, and we pretty much just have to play Howling Mine. I knew I should have gotten that basic Plains. We have a ton of fetchable lands, so it's not like Aven Mind Sensor is a death sentence, like we'll never draw another land. But it does make our life a lot harder and slower. And it might make it slow enough. It might make us slow enough that our opponent can just win. Okay, another Sheffet Dunes into a Blade Splicer. Okay, we untap. We draw a Hallowed Fountain and a Path. Okay. Shock Hallowed Fountain. Pass the turn. We might have to Cryptic Tap Team, because Path is not going to deal with Mind Sensor here. But if we tap the team, Path will actually be able to answer Mind Sensor. Yeah. We're going to go with Cryptic Tap. No targets, so hopefully no way to fizzle. Okay. Temporal Mastery off the top. Let's go. Opponent has another Tech Edge. Wonderful. Okay. And Thalia. I don't know if our life could get much worse. No way we have double white for Verdict, and it's unlikely we get a land off of Polluted Delta. And even if we do, we can only Path, we can't Cryptic. Ugh. I think we might just be dead. Well, we got an island, so I guess we're on the Flash Dictate of Krufix plan. But our opponent has 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage. So if they play a land, we die. We have to discard, so we are going to discard 1 Dictate. We might be able, if they can't kill us this turn, okay, we're dead. They did not sack Sheffet Dunes? It's like, did I do my math wrong? Ah, Arbiter. So they'll make us pay on our turn to search, which means we don't want to search. Opponent's just going to Ghost Quarter us now. It's fine, because we're not paying for it next turn anyway. We basically need to Miracle Temporal Mastery to continue playing. Not even to win, just to continue playing. Okay, basic Plains. Very close. Almost got there. Yeah, that's game. If we had 1 more white mana, had I fetched this earlier, we probably would have won. But I didn't think about it, which sucks. And we don't have any fogs. Exhaustion doesn't do it. Path doesn't do it. Yeah. All right. Sad days, but sometimes you get death and taxes. It's just how it is. All right. I'll see you guys in round 5. All right, round 5. Here we go. Oof. Big oof. Got them all. Much better. We're gonna keep and put back Part the Water Veil. We're going to be shuffling, so it being on the bottom of our deck is fine. Opponent starts Breeding Pool tapped. So this is probably Teamer or Sultai Uro pile. Start Flooded Strand. Pass the turn. If I have to pitch something to Force of Negation, it's going to be Time Warp, which is disheartening, but if I have to force, it's staying alive, so... Okay. Oh, it could be Bant Control, actually. We get a Hollowed Fountain. Untap. We draw Giga Drowse, so play an island. Pass the turn. I would pitch Giga Drowse to force if my opponent cast a Teferi. Uro. We could just exile Uro, but I think he's only a threat if he gets recast, and I don't want to give my opponent another land. So my opponent basically has to have Force of Negation to deal with Teferi here. Which is not impossible. My opponent has drawn an extra card. Fetch a basic island. Play Teferi. Okay, they do have Force. They pitch Supreme Verdict, which is a card that is useless against us. Oh shoot. Turn off auto yields. I have Force of Negations in this deck. What am I doing? Okay, we draw Serum Vision, so we Serum Visions. Dictate, Time Warp to the bottom, Prairie Stream to the top. Pass the turn. Basically just leaving a path this turn. Opponent does only have 3 cards in hand. Okay, they play a Breeding Pool tapped. We untap. We draw Prairie Stream, so play Prairie Stream. Pass the turn. If my opponent has more counter spells, we might be in trouble. But we do have a Force for the first one, and if they don't have multiple, we're probably going to draw a land and combo off. So, Flash Dictate. It resolves. Untap. We draw Polluted Delta and a Snow-Covered Plains. Play a Plains. And we're going to go for it. Time Warp. Okay, Cryptic's pretty bad. I'm pretty glad they did not bounce Dictate of Kruphix. I think my opponent wants to draw an additional card. Okay, Castle Vantress for our opponent. They get to draw 1 extra card here. Okay, we draw Flooded Strand and Mystic Sanctuary. So play Mystic Sanctuary, put Time Warp on top, see if this makes our opponent do anything. Nope. Time Warp ourselves. Okay, so opponent's going to have Snap Cryptic. And they know we're drawing a Time Warp next turn. Okay, counter draw. I get 1 extra draw. So my opponent has had like 5 extra draws now off of their Cryptics and our Dictate. They play Misty, crack Misty. They get a Mystic Sanctuary. They're going to put Force of Negation on top. Okay. We might use Path to make them shuffle. Okay. So they have to shuffle away their Force of Negation. They choose not to search. Okay. Well, there's nothing I can do about this then. May search. Damn. For some reason I thought it was a forced search. Okay, well we draw Time Warp, which we're not going to cast. We're going to play an island and we're going to pass. We're going to go for a big Giga Drowse on all of their blue mana at their end step, and then we are going to cast Time Warp with hard cast Force of Negation back up. I don't know how much good it's going to do considering the number of cards my opponent has drawn, but okay, they play a Flooded Strand. That does let them hide 1 blue mana. Replicated 5 times. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to tap all of our opponent's lands that are blue and aren't Castle Vantress. Okay. Okay, opponent paths their own wall. They want extra mana. They're not using Castle Vantress, which is interesting to me. They probably think they're safe with just Force of Negation. If they have multiple, we're probably boned. But So Time Warp ourself. Going to Crack's Flooded Strand. This is a non-force counterspell. That's a big deal. Okay, they hard cast Force of Negation. Fun trick, opponent. I can do that too. What? What is happening? Moto. Moto. Does anyone see what's happening here? Hang on. Cancel. Okay. I think I gotta restart Moto. I'll be right back. Okay, no, it worked. Update to the card. Restart later. Should know better than to interrupt my games like this. Alright, Time Warp. We untap. We can either get an extra draw. Yeah, getting an extra draw is good here. Because we could hit any Time Warp or Part the Water Veil would be good. So we draw Mystic Sanctuary, Exhaustion, and Mikokoro. So Mystic Sanctuary, put Time Warp on top, and exhaust our opponent. Sweet. Opponent gets to draw 3 cards, and that means they can absolutely have drawn Force of Negation again. But they only have 1 mana this turn. And the game is over. Whew. Was that game 1 of round 5? It was. Felt like a lot longer than that for some reason. Okay, so we're probably not going to need Path, and we're probably not going to need Jace. What do we bring in versus our opponent's deck? Probably just Silence. Silence seems kind of good. Cryptic seems kind of bad. We can bring in the Final Force. I think that's fine. Probably over a Giga Drowse. Giga Drowse is like okay, but it's not amazing. We might want Aether Gust. I'll play 1 Aether Gust over a Giga Drowse. We'll see if I regret that. Alright. If we make it to 4 mana, we'll have Silence into Teferi. Into Silence. Teferi Silence seems pretty fantastic. Okay, opponent fetches a Hallowed Fountain and passes. We untap. We draw an island, so Serum Visions. Draw Temporal Mastery. Serum Visions to the bottom. I want to draw another Teferi, though. Pass the turn. Okay. Opponent plays Wall of Omens. We draw Teferi, so play Flooded Strand. Pass the turn. Okay, opponent plays a Misty Rainforest, another Wall of Omens. Sure. Fetch Hollow Fountain. Tapped. We untap. Draw Mystic Sanctuary. Okay. So we're going to play an island, and we're going to run out Teferi. This should almost certainly draw Force. Because if they don't force this and they have Force, there's basically nothing they can do at instant speed anymore. We're going to downtick, and we're not going to unsummon a Wall of Omens. I don't want to give my opponent another redraw. Okay, they fetch up Breeding Pool tapped, we get an additional draw, and it's Dictative Crewfix. So from this point on, we're going to be silencing our opponent on their upkeep. They play Mind Sculptor. And Brainstorm. Alright. Fat lot of good drawing extra cards will do you. So we shock Hallowed Fountain, tick up Teferi, stop on my opponent's upkeep, and silence them. They can start ticking up Teferi and go for an ult, but drawing extra cards doesn't do anything here. I guess it lets them play lands if they don't have lands. So the best strategy our opponent has is to play lands into, like, Field of the Dead. They just rage quit. The old Teferi Silence rage quit. We were holding another Silence and we were going to Mystic Sanctuary back more. Oh, that's so dirty. Alright, well, we went 3-2. That very easily could have been a 4-1. And we're going to go ahead and open a treasure chest. We get 35 play points and Bruvok the Grandiloquent. I don't think Bruvok is worth anything. It'd be really funny if he is. Let's see. E-price Bruvok. Oh, he's 2 tickets. Sweet. So we definitely beat the average treasure chest here. And it's another 3-2 with blue-white time warps. Real quick before I end the video here, first off, reminder, my stream is probably going to be slightly late. I do apologize. I have yet to let the Discord know, and I need to let them know immediately after I do this. I think I'm running 1 basic less than I need to be. So I need to either drop a Hallowed Fountain or drop a Prairie Stream, and I think it needs to be an island. Running more than 1 plains is almost certainly wrong, but I think it needs to be an island. I like the fourth Mystic Sanctuary. In control games, instead of like winning hard, we won insanely hard, and we had a little more consistency in some of the combo turns, because there were combo turns in the previous league where we got all three Mystic Sanctuaries, and if we could have gotten the fourth, we absolutely would have, because it would have made it that much easier. I'm not huge on Giga Drowse. I'm really sad because Giga Drowse was basically in there as a way to beat control every single time. But because they have Force now, you need Giga Drowse and Teferi. And if you have Teferi, then you don't need Giga Drowse. So I really think Giga Drowse ought to be replaced, and it might be better as an opt. It might be better as a main deck silence. I don't know. If I dropped Giga Drowse, I might bring in like the fourth Force and a couple of silences, and in the sideboard, I would run Commandeer. Because if you play against Tron, Commandeer is an auto win if they cast Karn of any kind, but we'll see. Anyway, I will be continuing to work on this deck, and I will be playing it some more. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined. You can also follow me on Twitch. I stream Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Same username on there as you can find me on here. Thanks again. All my new subscribers, you're all wonderful human beings. Everybody who's watching this is a wonderful human being, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!